Hi folks, welcome back to We the People. I'm your host, Dave Gallus. Today's going to be an interesting subject, and it's going to be about orphans and students. Now, I'm not a preacher, but I do read the Bible every day, and I'm a very strong Christian. And I just want to quote one section. I mean, some of these Bible thumpers, they hit you with this quote and that quote, but you know what? This one really hit home to me, and it's from James 1:27. It says, and I quote, "Pure and undefiled religion before God is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble." So I got to thinking about this, and I'm thinking, okay, what's an orphan? You don't hear much about orphans anymore. But an orphan is a child without a parent. Or maybe it's a child that parents can't be there for them, whether physically, emotionally, or whatever. And what's a widow? It's a woman without a husband. Now, abortion in New Mexico is allowed up until birth. And you can compare that to Texas. Now, you've had recent legislation where the Texas legislature has banned abortions once there's a heartbeat detected. Now, to me, that's a step in the right direction. And I certainly don't want to criminalize women that have to make the choice. I can't imagine such a choice. I mean, I've been a father many times, and I've been in tough positions, and thank God I never felt as though I had to make the decision to take my child out or to not allow them a life. I've had 4 children, 2 have survived and 2 have not. My daughter passed away at 8 months, and she had a congenital heart problem and suffered 5 of those 8 months. My son, who just died recently last year, he was involved with drugs. So even what they've gone through, I'm so glad that both of them had the opportunity to live. And again, I'm not judging any woman that has to make that decision and feels that that is the only option that she has. So my ideology is give the child a chance, support the mother, support the father, and make the father accountable, or at least induce him to want to be accountable, because he's going to feel better about himself to start with. So, but there's a different ideology out there now, and it's the liberal ideology. And I have a lot of liberal friends, but I think you think about, okay, what is the ideology of the liberal left? And it's that sex is free. I mean, really? No, you're going to pay one way or the other. You're going to pay emotionally if you have to make that decision, or you're going to pay financially, or if you're responsible, you're going to be in a situation that you might not want to be in. So it'd be so wise to pick the right partner before you have sex that the result can be a child. And then you don't have to be in a position where you might consider destroying that child. And there's big money in the abortion industry, no doubt about that. And you know, I think back when I was a kid, I would talk to my grandfather. Now, he was born in what, the 20s or early 1900s. And he would tell me that it was normal. Now, this was a Philadelphia neighborhood, but I'm sure it was true all around the country. It was a middle-class Philadelphia neighborhood along the Delaware River, and he said it was very common for a family that couldn't afford, or emotionally couldn't afford, or financially couldn't afford to raise a child, the neighbors would raise that child. I think my grandfather was actually put in a neighbor's home for quite some time until their family got on their feet. And my grandfather also belonged to a yacht club, as I belonged to a yacht club. Now, don't get the idea that our family was rich, because you hear the word yacht and you think, oh, these, duck, I forget what they call them, but the clothing with a white hat, an admiral's hat, these are affluent, rich people. Not so. The yacht club is just a bunch of boaters. And the boat that we had was a 20-foot, it was a lumbering 20-foot wooden boat, cabin cruiser, that my grandfather, that same grandfather, gave to us as a gift. And the yacht club was more of a social group of men and women that liked boating, and we happened to live right next, well, very close to the Delaware River. Our yacht club was on the Delaware River. But the point I'm making is that the yacht club leased that land from St. Vincent's Orphanage. Now, St. Vincent's Orphanage was run by the Christian Catholic Church, and it was also a school. So they would take in orphans, and they would teach the children traditional values, and it was very much like the education that I received in the Catholic schools. Now, I would say that we got a very good academic education. I knew how to balance a checkbook when I was 19 years old and I was starting a family. Our government doesn't know how to do that yet. And I don't know if it ever will if we keep the same government. But the education that I received was also not just academics, math, science, history, English, true history, real history, English, how to write, how to read. But you also learn discipline. Now, those nuns were pretty tough. And I got knocked around just like most of the boys in my class got knocked around from time to time. The girls, they got it easier, that's for sure. But you learn discipline. And, you know, getting knocked around isn't the worst thing in the world. I know people say, oh, my parents spanked me. Yeah, well, that was common in my time. And guess what? We had kids that grew up and respected their parents. You don't seem to have that anymore. Now you have a government saying, you're not allowed to touch your child. Now that's getting into people's homes, but they're also in our schools. So the government now runs social services instead of orphanages. And from what I understand back then, there might have been a scandal that involved a couple of the church-run schools and orphanages. And I think that's all that it took for the liberal left to take over and say, oh, we're going to take charge of it. Now, I've talked to people that grew up in the new system where the government actually has the social services, child protective custody. I heard that's not that good. And I've heard firsthand that it was a poor bringing up and probably abuse that was going on too. So, and I would say this, that the churches could have a very big role in this, but for some reason they have backed off from that. So, in my grandfather's time, abortion was not an industry, but the orphanage and adoption was an industry, and a very successful industry. But that's only part of it. So why is it that we have a government that doesn't listen to us when it comes to, well, I'm saying the majority of people, I believe, do not want abortions, but they want alternatives to it. But the other alternative is the family system. Well, if you don't have a family, it's really hard to raise a child. So men and women need to be responsible in their choice of partners, their commitment to each other, and to sex that produces a child. But if you don't have a family, why don't you have a family? They talk about the nuclear family. Well, when I was growing up, I'll say when I was 12 years old, that was 1963, my dad was a Philadelphia fireman. He made $3,000 a year. $3,000 a year. Now that wasn't just his salary. He also, well, it was a lower salary in the fire department, but he also made money on the side by shoveling snow and cutting grass. $3,000 a year. He supported a family of 7 in a single home in a blue-collar neighborhood in Philadelphia. What would $3,000 get you right now? Raise a family? I don't think so. You couldn't even pay the taxes on a house, let alone live in it, and raise a family of 7? No way. So we went to Catholic school, and I commend my parents for doing that. In the beginning, you didn't have to pay tuition because the parishioners that went to the churches, their money went to support the schools. I went to St. Dominic schools all the way through 8th grade and then to Father Judge High School in Northeast Philadelphia in high school. And most of it was supported in the early days by the parishioners of the different churches that fed that school system. Later on, they must have backed off, or the increased cost of schooling must have grew so much that now parents had to pay so much money to keep their children in the Catholic school system, the Christian school system. And my folks, even though they didn't have much money, and my mother didn't work, she was a stay-at-home mom. But I know she had the harder job. She was raising us 4 boys and a girl. And I was not the troublemaker, but what was I? I was the adventurous son. And I was my mother's challenge. But when my younger brothers came up, they said, well, Mom wore herself out on you, trying to run around keeping you out of trouble. So I wasn't bad. I was just mischievous, adventurous, you know. So, but my point is that back then, the husband could make a fair wage, the wife could stay home and raise the children. I think better nowadays would be for both husband and wife to work, but alternate, you know, to where the father would take a bigger role in raising children as the fathers did back in my time. So, okay, so the politics that we have now, and the Democrats are in charge and have been in charge for a while, locally, statewide, federally. They believe in tax and spend. They don't believe in balanced budgets. Or if they believe in a balanced budget, even if they pass the law for a balanced budget, they're just going to raise the debt ceiling. So really, you would have to have a balanced budget and a debt ceiling, and you can't go above a certain amount. Well, our government doesn't know how to do that, or doesn't want to do that, and we can make a difference in that if we vote the right people into office. Nothing is going to change until we get the right people, the right legislators in office, and then we let them know exactly what we want, and then we vote them in or out depending on whether or not they're following what we want. Now, that's the tax and spend. So right along with that, and this happened in 1913, the Federal Reserve was created. Now, the Federal Reserve was a cabal of bankers. It's not federal. It's no more federal than Federal Express. But they put that name on it to make it sound like it's a legitimate federal organization. It is not. It's a money-making operation. But they're in cahoots with the government. And they were back then, and they still are. And it gets worse and worse and worse. So the Federal Reserve, when the debt goes up, they just crank out some more money. And as you put more money into the system, even though you don't have gold reserves to back it up, that money's value shrinks. So in 1963, when I was 12 years old, that $1 bill in today's standards is worth 2 cents. That's why you have to have both parents working. You have to realize that in a free market enterprise system, which is what grew this country, price of products and services goes down. You have competition. When you have competition, and government is not competition, when government's involved in anything, you know the price is going to go up because you don't have accountability and you don't have competition. With competition, you get the best product for the cheapest price. That's free market enterprise. And that, again, is what grew our country. So the Federal Reserve, along with the tax and spend policies of the our republic, which is run by Democrats now, and there are some Republicans, too, that believe in tax and spend. Big mistake. Big, big mistake. You're not teaching anybody responsibility. Like I said, I knew how to balance a checkbook when I was 19 years old and started to raise a family. Our government doesn't know how to do that. Why would you keep spending when you don't have the money? Now, I imagine a lot of you folks, and I've been burnt, too, with credit cards, you never get out from under it. I don't know what we are, how many $1 trillion we owe in debt. And the new administration wants to hike it up even more. And it wants to be in social services. So does it make sense that you would give people a handout instead of giving them a job? You weaken the people, or you make the people dependent on you to keep giving the handout. And maybe that's the whole idea. The Democratic Party wants to continue to make parasites of people so that they continue to vote for those Democrat politicians so that they continue to get the handouts. But at some point, we're not going to be solvent. We owe China money, and China is not our friend. What happens when China says we want our debt, we're calling in our debt? In our Constitution, we are supposed to pay our debts. Well, and I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a very large percentage of our debt, or our budget, that pays for the interest on our debt. So we're about the end of the first half of the show. So I want you to think about that during the break, and we'll come back, and I do have a solution, and I hope you enjoy it. We'll be back in a minute.
Redness, burning, itchy feet. You may be suffering from athlete's foot and be eligible for a clinical trial. 3A Research is conducting a clinical trial of an investigational drug for treating athlete's foot. This is a 6-week study. We will compensate your time, travel, and reimbursement of up to $225. Contact our office, 3A Research with Michael Raucci.
Call our offices today for more information. Serving El Paso and now open in Las Cruces. I hope to see you soon.
Do you feel like people are avoiding you? Don't be a dreaded spreader. Protect yourself and those around you from flu. Here's 3 things you should do. Get a flu vaccine each year. Take everyday preventive actions to stop the spread of germs, like covering coughs and sneezes and washing your hands, and stay home if you're sick. If you do get the flu, contact a healthcare professional right away and take flu antivirals if prescribed. Don't be a dreaded spreader. Take 3 steps to fight flu.
Hi, I'm Ray Bamberg with Here on Earth. I would like to invite you for a free hearing evaluation to our office. We've been here in southern New Mexico for 34 years helping people hear better.
Did you know children should have their first comprehensive eye exam at 6 months of age and every 1 to 2 years afterwards? Unfortunately, most children have not had an eye exam. While there are many reasons children haven't been to an eye doctor, the ability to pay for the exam is not one of them. Medicaid or most private insurances cover the cost of the exam and glasses. And if they don't, New Mexico Lion's Operation Kids Site has funding available, so it's free for the family.
Hi folks, welcome back to We the People. I'm Dave Gallus, your host, and I just want to remind you that 3A clinical research is going to be doing testing now on athlete's foot. Now they're over on Tell Shore in Las Cruces, and you get compensated for your time. So really it's a good deal. Testing's going on, so make sure you check out 3A research over on Tell Shore. It's right near Spruce, where Spruce comes into Tell Shore. So we were talking in the beginning of the show about orphans and students. Now the orphans, to me, in my time when I was a kid, my grandfather's time, orphans and adoption was a very big deal. And very few abortions, certainly compared to now. So it's a matter of being responsible and accountable. Then we were also talking about students, and I was brought up in the Catholic faith, and I went to Catholic schools, and that made all the difference, I'm sure. I knew my academics, I learned respect, and nowadays we don't see that in the public school system. Nowadays, because the government has caused inflation, you need both parents to work. So where do the kids go? I mean, in preschool, we have a government that wants to take your kids almost as soon as they're born. For what? Or the kids can go to daycare, but that costs money. If you got both parents working, that's an added expense. So it makes sense that the government is giving the people that can't afford to send the kids to daycare another option, which is, oh, the government will teach them. What are they teaching them? They're teaching them indoctrination to be little socialists, and you probably heard about critical race theory. This critical race theory is an absolute mess. It pits students against each other, making some believe that they're oppressors and some believe that they're victims. Now, in the state of Virginia, in this just recent election we just had yesterday, but that would be, let's see, a few days ago, they voted for a person that does not believe in critical race theory. Now, let me just read you something that I got off the wire. The Virginia School Board of Loudoun County, where the original rape occurred. Now, this was a rape occurred in the school, and this, well, I'll read on. It was original rape. It was covered up because it interfered with the school board's implementation of their transgender rights policy. Parents became aware and challenged that school board in open meetings. The National School Board Association asked the Biden administration to investigate the threats by outraged parents, and the Biden administration referred the matter to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland was considered by the Democrats to be a candidate for the Supreme Court, and thank goodness he didn't get it. Now let me give you a little bit of background too. This kid raped a girl in the one school, so they moved him to another school, and he raped a girl. They covered that up, and he raped another girl in the next school system. So one of the people that was outraged was the father of the girl that was raped. Now, instead of the Attorney General, after he was notified by the Biden administration, investigating the cover-up of the original rape and the transfer of the student without prosecution, He directed the Department of Justice to investigate the parents who were justifiably outraged. The parents are being considered domestic terrorists by the Department of Justice. Now, isn't that something? Parents aren't allowed to say anything. You think that can't happen here? If you don't get involved in your school system and in your local politics, it can and it will happen here. Now, in this race that I was talking about, the past governor, Terry McAuliffe, he was a governor, I think, not this race, but the race before. He's been out for a term. He knew full well of what had happened in the Loudoun County, and he promotes critical race theory, which I talked about, pitting students against each other, depending on your skin color. And his quote was, "Parents should have no say in their children's education." You got to wake up, folks. Virginia voters understood what was going on. They did not vote Terry McAuliffe in. They voted in Glenn Youngkin, who believes parents should have a voice, that they should have school choice, and he promised on day one to remove critical race theory from the public school curriculum in Virginia. Those parents were involved, knew what was going on, and voted accordingly. And they had fair and honest elections, which I'm not sure that that's true throughout the country. So let me ask you, are you involved in your kids' education? Do you get involved in local politics to find out what's going on? Not just the presidential race. There's very few people that vote in local city races. Look at the numbers that we just had a city race here in Las Cruces. It's ridiculous, the number of people that don't vote. If you don't get involved, you're subject to the government that you deserve. So, okay, a solution. My solution to the problem of abortions and indoctrination of our children, the key player is the churches and the church people and the church leaders. In my opening, I quoted from the Bible, which I don't like to quote from the Bible. I don't like to be one of those Bible thumpers, but this one really hit me hard. It was from James 1:27. Look it up. Quote, "Pure and undefiled religion before God is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble." That means help orphans and help widows. What's an orphan? A child without a parent, or a parent that doesn't want the child, before or after birth. And what is a widow? A widow doesn't have a husband. So we are supposed to help these people. And widows, to me, is a woman that might be carrying a child but does not have a responsible male to stand up for his actions. So we help them, we support them. So my idea is, speak to your church leaders and suggest that the church family begin a conversation or a dialogue about reinstituting orphanages where you welcome children, unwanted children, or mothers that can't take care of the children, or have some type of deal where, okay, a mother can't take the child for now, but maybe when she gets on her feet, through the help of the church or other charities, then she can take the child. Less abortions, more adoptions. The orphanage, you know, when I was going to the yacht club, or was part of the yacht club, and we would have St. Vincent's Orphanage that would have the children come in on boat rides, or they would come over and we would have Christmas parties for them. These kids are just like us. They were like regular kids, you know. It's not like the movie Annie. It's a hard knock life for us, you know. Those kids seem to be genuinely happy. Now, you had lay teachers and you had religious teachers. The nuns can be tough, but you know what? You learn discipline. And so I'm saying have your church leaders consider, have a discussion within your church about, not only should we have orphanages, but those orphanages would be schools too. And if you want to keep your kids away from government-run schools, which I certainly would, after my son passed away from drugs, I had to reconsider, okay, what did I do wrong? And I do that all the time. I go through this roller coaster of guilt. What could I have done better? One of the things would have been to send him to a Christian school. He went to a public school system. I'm not saying that that was their fault that he got involved in drugs. That was partly my fault. But it would have been a better opportunity for him. My daughters, from an earlier marriage that went to Catholic school, no problems. So you got to think, folks. Okay, so if we get orphanages that also have school systems, and we get legislation to where the money that we pay for our kids, for schools, all public schools, would go and follow the student, and the parents would have a choice where they send their children, what those children learn. And absolutely, the parents should have the biggest say in their children's education, and they should have a choice where their kids can go. Right now, I ran in the 2020 election, against Bill Soules. He's the top senator in the state in education. He was the chairman of the education committee. We are the worst state in the union. I thought, how can I lose to this guy? Maybe I didn't lose. Maybe there was some play with the numbers. Who knows? But the thing is, when you are the worst state in the union in education, something's wrong, folks, and it needs to be corrected. Now, you could go to a person like that and say, well, I want my child moved to another school, another public school with the same systemic problem. Why would you do that? That's tough on the kids, and it's not fixing the problem. The problem is government-run schools, and the problem is unaccountability for parents of children that are unborn. So again, I would say, talk to your church leaders. Explain to them that you would like to be involved in this. And really, we all have to be involved. We have to be involved in politics, and I've heard some people say, oh, church and politics don't mix. Well, guess what? If you don't get involved in politics, you saw what happened in the COVID shutdown. They were shutting down churches, saying that we can't practice our religion. They had some of these religious leaders that were arrested, that were fined. How can you allow that to happen? So, at the same time, engage these politicians and let them know how you feel. But most importantly, you have to get out and vote. You have to be aware of what's going on. You have to know who the people are that support your wishes, your Christian traditional values, and make your church leaders accountable. So, I hope you enjoyed the show. You can call in, you can email me, tell me what you think. You can yell at me if you like. But whatever you do, start thinking about your children's future. This is Dave Gallus from the Las Cruces Studios, Las Cruces Channel Studios. See you next week.